Hello, everyone. I'm Aaron Newcomer and wanted to talk to you a little bit about a display that I did about a year ago at the Texas Gun Collectors Association show in Denton, Texas, about the innovative guns of Joseph Alexander Robert. So we'll go through a little overview of the system and look in detail at all of the different models. So while flintlocks still ruled the battlefields in the 1830s, Robert's forward-thinking design epitomized the inevitability of breech loaders, self-contained cartridges, and percussion firing. His design called for a completely new system that allowed his cartridges to be loaded from the breech instead of the muzzle. He also introduced a one-piece primed paper cartridge that held the bullet and powder, making it far easier to carry and use than loose powder and balls. And he designed his own copper tube primers filled with detonating powder and inserted into the rear of his paper cartridge to ignite the charge. You can see here in the initial patent design how it called for these tube primers. This very first version had this odd coiled bent shaped primer. I've never seen that in any of the cartridges. And then here you'll see the long pointed one that pokes right into it. The tube primer on the bottom left here is designed so that you could actually adapt this to any paper cartridge design, as it would just slide right in. The military cartridge style shown here from my collection just has a straight tube primer in it. And it's not as long or pointy. It only goes to about here on the cartridge. The breech block's opening motion automatically cocks an internal percussion hammer, readying the gun to fire the instant it closed. The cartridges would actually be pushed into the breech here, with the primers sticking out the back, and then the under hammers would come up and smash the tube primer, igniting the powder. So Robert's first gun that he introduced was in 1831, and it was a musket that he tried to get military contracts for. Shortly after the Belgian Revolution, there were at least 1,400 of these guns that were ordered by the new Belgian army. The Belgian Army Museum has recently been doing some research on these as well, and they have serial numbers all the way up to about 1,400. They actually published a detailed comparative test back at the time when they tested this between it and all of their existing muskets. And I was actually trying to think of some statistics, and this has to be one of the earliest breech-loading cartridge guns adopted by any military. It may even be the earliest percussion firing gun adopted by a military. For example, the Dry-Z needle fire gun was first tested nearly a decade later. Then in 1834, the Society for the Encouragement of Industry reviewed Robert's design and spoke on the revolutionary improvements it brought to firearms. They awarded it a gold medal, which was the first gold medal they had ever awarded to a firearm. And shortly after this, actually, the Russian government also issued an imperial decree adopting this as a weapon of the army. It was reported in a French newspaper that the Russian government had an artisan come from Paris to whom it gave a compensation of 30,000 rubles and very strong incentives, making him commit to staying for 10 years in the artillery workshops to lead the manufacture of the Roberts rifle. This artisan subsequently brought his family to St. Petersburg. At the time of the report, it was noted that a certain number of old flintlock rifles had been converted into Robert rifles, and this manufacturing continues very secretly and for quite some time in the government workshops. It talks a bit more about how the gun works, and then states that the Robert rifle has made a significant leap in the improvement of firearms by eliminating the flint, the chimney, the priming mechanism, and by igniting the primer in the cartridge. Its advantages are no longer in question today. The great success it achieves as a hunting rifle will not be long in popularizing it, emphasizing the need to use it for war. If one of the great powers of Europe adopts it, all the others will be forced to do likewise. Then in 1837, the U.S. Army trials of early breech-loading rifles tested this gun, which was presented by Baron Hackett. I always love these early documents that break out the exact cost of every single little piece. You can show the price for the guard screw or trunnion plates or the swivels. It breaks it out to the fraction of a penny. The manufacturing cost projected by the Springfield Armory put Robert's rifle at about $13 per unit when mass produced. And that was similar to the $12 to $13 estimate for Cochran's repeating rifle, and actually much cheaper than the $18 to $20 estimate for Colt's repeating rifle. In some demonstrations, they showed that Robert's rifle penetrated about half an inch into white oak at a target 100 yards away, while the standard 69 caliber U.S. musket achieved about an inch of penetration, but had almost double the grains of powder charge compared to Robert's. Many of the guns were tested at differing distances and loads, so it's kind of hard to make exact apples to apples comparisons, but Robert's rifle seemed to be at par or higher in performance than some of the other candidates. The Army's test did highlight some limitations of Robert's design, including fouling from the paper cartridges and concerns about the safety of its fulminate-based primers when using bulk ammunition. And the board's recommendation was switching to traditional loose powder and ball as a remedy. However, they noted the rifle's merits warranted purchasing 100 units for further evaluation. You can also see here they did test it at this higher grain charge, and it did have a little better performance at that higher charge. So around 1834, ads for Robert's shotgun adaptation started appearing. It used the same mechanism as the musket, but had two barrels and was quite a bit shorter. And Robert started advertising a lot. Write-ups about his gun would show up in various books for hunters. This particular book had about 2 chapters dedicated to Robert's guns. And I think I have 3 variations of this, or 3 editions of this book, and some of them had fold-out drawings or ads in it as well. The author actually started the chapter with the following quote, translated to English. For 20 years, I have bought all the new guns. I have tried all the systems, and my cabinet resembles more a museum of artillery than that of an amateur hunter. Therefore, in giving preference to the Robert system, I did not decide by theory, but by great and long experience. I have been using the Robert rifle daily for 4 years. I am so satisfied with it that I do not think I can devote the pages of this work to a subject more useful and more agreeable to my readers than the description of this remarkable weapon. I will take the liberty of adding to it the result of the observations that I have been able to make in his practice. Here's an example of the fold-out drawing in one edition. Robert used this in various publications, including his own pamphlet on his guns. Here we also show a pistol, which we're not going to talk about in this presentation, but I actually recently just picked up a pistol example to go with all of the long arms, and maybe we'll do a video or a post about it in the future. You can also see an example of the shot shells, and they're kind of neat as they were sold with a protective holder. The shot shell would actually go inside this hollow portion of the protective holder with a cork or wood bottom here that had a hole drilled in it. So the primer would actually stick in this protective kind of wood or cork holder with more of the cartridge being contained in this hollow portion. The picture on the left was also in one of the editions of that book, but it was first published, along with these others shown here, in a French fashion publication called La Mode. It was typically filled with women's fashion, but every once in a while it would show men with hunting attire, and over the years, Robert's guns kept showing up in them. He also advertised in all of the popular French newspaper. His tagline was 15 shots per minute, which would appear in almost everything he would publish. We'll talk a little bit about the endless rivalry that Robert had with Lefaucheux. So beneath the aura of innovation and competition in the firearms industry, a poignant quote from Robert emerges. Those wishing to use this new weapon must, above all, fully understand that the Robert system is not a simple modification like the many improved rifles such as the Pauli, Lefaucheux, and others, but rather a complete, entirely new system that is totally superior to anything made thus far in firearms. At the end of 1833, Robert was in the middle of a lawsuit over the similarity of his guns to the Pauli guns, which were now in public domain. During the trial, Robert talked about Lefaucheux's, who was the owner of the Pauli company currently, his new design and how it was apt to blow up in your face. Lefaucheux took out this ad 2 days later, challenging Robert to a duel of innovation, judged by the Academy of Industry, who had given Robert a gold medal earlier in the year. And Robert agreed to the duel, and a detailed comparative competition was enacted, which resulted in over 40 pages of comparative tests. They had Robert shoot Lefaucheux's gun, Lefaucheux shoot Robert's gun, and they put the two guns through a series of tests comparing Lefaucheux's brand new percussion design to Robert's. They tested hundreds of shots through each and measured to the second how long each step took and exactly what movements needed done to load and unload each gun. However, the climactic duel did not yield a clear victor. The Academy, in its wisdom, refrained from choosing sides. Instead, they acknowledged the strengths and weaknesses of both firearms, emphasizing the monumental technological advancements these guns represented. Their verdict was clear. These weapons heralded the future of firearms. They specifically said that they were a significant advancement in the improvement of portable firearms, and they offered significant superiority over all other weapons of the same kind. They mentioned Robert's rifle had a faster shot, and the Lefaucheux's gun was better for the service of infantry and the armament of the troops. Also, that the Lefaucheux rifle had a perfectly executed mechanism. They didn't declare They did declare that the two Robert and Lefaucheux rifles are among the best of their kind, and that everyone should pay serious attention to these new rifles. A year later, Lefaucheux would invent the pinfire cartridge, which I think completed the change of the future of firearms, but that's a story for another talk. Then in the early 1840s, Robert's shop manager, Jules Joseph Chaudun, took over the Robert Company. In 1845, Chaudun introduced his new version of the Robert gun to the Society for the Encouragement of Industry, along with his improved method of making primers and cartridges. One interesting aspect is the application of his tube primer as an extra long percussion cap that can slide right into a pinfire cartridge from the outside. You can see here this same design that can be used in the Robert cartridges. It's also used as a pen, fire pen, and cap. I have an example of this here in my collection. You have this really long percussion cap with a pin that slides in, and then you can slide it into a pinfire cartridge here. Makes it also easily reloadable without a recapping tool. And the same type of tube primer loaded with the fulminate at the ends could be used in the Robert guns. So Chaudun's version of this gun looks mostly the same from the outside with very few internal differences. But one version was adapted for pinfire cartridges. The oblong-shaped breech opening, which helped with the gas sealing, necessitated a really odd-shaped base on this pinfire cartridge. You can kind of see it here. The underhammer was adapted to hit the pins of the cartridge rather than smash the tube primer. And you can see the cut open here where the pin faces down into the gun. And that is all I have for this presentation. But feel free to get a hold of me if you ever have any other questions. Subscribe to this new Lefaucheux Museum YouTube channel. We'll post a lot of interesting content like this in the future. And be sure to sign up for the newsletter on lefaucheux.com. Also, you can check out my posts and other things that I write about, primarily relating to antique firearms and cartridges at AaronNewcomer.com. Thanks for watching.